I will be responding to the prompt, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself and others. I was in an office that I'd never been in before with this man whom I've never met, who spoke a language I only half understood. My German uncle decided to get me a meeting with a, quote, cool engineer, Mr. Klein, because he heard from my sister that I might or might not be interested in engineering. Either way, the engineer turned out to be pretty cool from what I could discern from his rapid German. He is a landscape engineer, and he helped to develop many of Dubai's boardwalks. After he finished describing his work, he asked me what I may want to study. I replied simply with, keine Ahnung, no idea. To which he responded almost immediately with the phrase, find was, das du genug liebst, die Welt zu wandern. The first time he said that, I understood him to mean, find something that will change the world. And I imagined, how many times have I been told that before? But this engineer kept saying it, and by the fourth or fifth time, I could process what he actually meant. Find something that you love enough in order to change the world. I had heard many times, find something that you love, and find something that will change the world, but never had they been combined. It was either find a fun job and be useless, or slave away in your studies and labor to make a difference. But the engineer proposed that a passion for a job is a prerequisite more important than any other to making a change. And hearing him talk so passionately about what he does only strengthened his point. After the meeting, I kept thinking about that one phrase, find was. I take it to heart because it reminds me that I could choose any subject to study, whether for money or perhaps ease, but none of it would matter, to me or anyone else, if I were passionless. If I want to change the world, I must find what I love enough. I acted upon that phrase almost immediately after I returned home. Before my trip to Germany, I had wanted to do a research project, but decided against it because I wanted to focus on my classes. But learning the importance of having passion in whatever I do has convinced me to do the project anyways, because it involves something I have a deep interest in. The project concerns traffic. Nashville is a booming city whose roads are not meant to handle the current influx of drivers. And seeing this traffic every day made me want to consider what can be done to ease it. But a passion for traffic wasn't what urged me to start the research. Rather, it was a fondness for physics. While making my 40-minute commute one day, I noticed a similarity between the flow of cars on the road and the movement of fluids in any similar apparatus, which gave me the idea to try to recreate and study traffic conditions in a lab using fluids to understand and maybe one day help ease the congestion in the city. It has been and will continue to be a ton of work, but I am more than happy to conduct the research anyway because of that one inspiring phrase. I might be helping my city because I'm working with something that I love. And while I may just be tinkering with some PVC pipes and water for now, I will continue to hold that phrase close as I continue to find what I love through life, die Welt zu wandern, in order to change the world. Thank you.
I'll be responding to the prompt, tell us about a person who has influenced you in a significant way. Where's my 3DS? I would observe passively as my brother Morgan Jr. devolved into a frenzied panic. He would bum rush the kitchen to find my working mother, accusingly demanding the whereabouts of his gaming system, and erupting in response to her dubious eyes and splayed hands. Typically, my brother would eventually find the Nintendo handheld device lodged between couch cushions or buried under a heap of beanbags. Ignoring his indisputable role in the preceding chaos, he would unapologetically retreat to his basement nook, only to resurface for dinner. My passivity in those situations had evolved as a byproduct of my apathy and a desire to complete my homework, and I would often dismiss his rampages as normal behavior. He was 13. That behavior made some sense to me. Occasionally, I would venture to his lair to ask if anything in particular had dampened his day. If not entirely disregarded, I would receive terse answers or an exasperated nothing. I would later realize that I encountered only the tip of Morgan's proverbial iceberg. He was lonely. He was being bullied at school. No one in my family knew of these realities until Morgan confessed them en route to a 9-week therapeutic wilderness program intended to combat his mounting screen addiction. His admission, however, was my epiphany. I had not been listening to the emotion of Morgan's situation, only its content. This realization catalyzed a personal change. I wanted to improve my ability to communicate. Letters to Morgan served as an immediate outlet. Having completed his summer regimen, Morgan enrolled at a developmental, nature-centric boarding school. His counselors encouraged my family and me to write him as part of his therapeutic process. Collectively, the family recognized that we wanted to convey our love to Morgan. Moreover, we desired to support him through his struggles, even as we learned how we may have contributed to them. My foremost goal was to demonstrate grace towards Morgan. He had occasionally stolen some of my electronic devices when his own iPad or Nintendo had been apprehended by my parents for punishment. While I had certainly been annoyed by his actions, I disengaged mentally and emotionally once my parents had stepped in. When I received my first letter from Morgan with an unsolicited apology for his actions, I was humbled and embarrassed. Morgan, an individual in a position of tremendous weakness, had the courage to be vulnerable and transparent in a challenging conversation. Unwilling to investigate further into my brother's actions, I had sat idly, assuming all would be okay. As I have learned more about my brother over the past several months, I've also begun to understand more about myself. Ironically, I was reading E.M. Forster's A Passage to India while Morgan was transitioning to his boarding school. Forster's novel is a template of how we often do not understand the situations of others, let alone ourselves. One of the novel's prominent characters, Mr. Fielding, describes how recognizing the truth of the mood, the emotional content behind one's comments and actions, is just as important as identifying the precise truth content of the words themselves. My reading in A Passage to India accentuated the lessons I was learning from my younger brother. He has taught me through his vulnerability to rise above my self-imposed ignorance and to become a better communicator. This new perspective has encouraged me to reevaluate different spheres of my life. For instance, spending a significant amount of time in a highly competitive prep school, I'm often tempted to focus solely on outward achievement. Progressively, however, I've come to find and enjoy outlets that allow me to practice the nuances I'm learning, such as doing in-depth interviews for our newspaper, The Bell Ringer, and participating in forums on hot-button issues with students from other schools. Thanks to Morgan, I'm learning the skills that will serve me well beyond high school. Thank you.
My essay is responding to the same prompt. Tell us about a person who's influenced you in a significant way. And I wrote about my grandfather. Some of my earliest memories of my grandfather are our phone conversations. He would call most Sundays to talk with my family and me and to let us know that he was thinking about and praying for us. We would bemoan together how poorly the Browns were playing. My grandfather's an ardent Cleveland sports fan, a trait he's passed on to me, and catch up on what was going on in my life. These weekly conversations provided us with a substantial connection. Although he lived in Cleveland, he would go out of his way to visit us in Nashville to attend my brother's and my sporting events. His efforts made me feel loved, and I was grateful to have a grandfather who cared so much for me. He showed me this love not only through his visits, but also through the blessing he would say over me each time he would leave. Because of the importance of the love that he showed me, my grandfather became a person whom I admired and wanted to emulate. This status he held as a role model in my life made stomaching the news of his Alzheimer's diagnosis even more difficult. I'll never forget the car ride to Cleveland when my parents broke the news to us that Papa John was beginning to fade away. In the subsequent years, the reality of his disease has been difficult in ways I never could have anticipated. Alzheimer's is such a painful way to lose someone because that loved one is still there with the same face and voice, but not the same mind controlling him. My whole family has had to deal with this gradual loss of our shared father. At the beginning, he would misplace items and forget to do small tasks, and more recently, he's moved into an Alzheimer's care facility full-time. Accepting each progressive and slow loss has caused a lot of grief and frustration for us. As I watched my grandfather diminish in faculties and being, I've often thought about the connections and bonds he made during his life. The most significant effect he had on me was through his intentionality in nurturing our relationship through phone calls, visits, and prayers. Now, his skill of bonding with others is beginning to fall apart as well. He can no longer make calls from his care facility, so hearing from him directly is rare. Additionally, we came to the painful realization last year that his limited mobility meant that he would probably never be able to visit us in Nashville again. His care and connection to me showed me that I was valued and loved. We all need to have others around us who make us feel like we matter. My grandfather truly recognized this necessity, and he worked to make sure that he was connected with those around him. As I saw him act out this ideal in our relationship and in his interactions with others, I came to appreciate how important connections are. When I do see my grandfather, he still greets me with an enthusiastic, "Hey, Jackson," despite his knowing well that Jack is short for John, a name given to me after him. I'm living out his memory by making certain the people I love most know that I care about them. I give my siblings extra hugs and send funny Snapchats, and I've been intentional in setting aside time to be with friends. As a result, my closest friends and I have grown more comfortable around one another. Rather than needing activity or amusement to commune over, we enjoy being present together and developing our bonds. The blessings that my grandfather prayed over me as we parted in the past continue to bless me, even though I've lost so much of him to Alzheimer's. Thank you.
There's the drum roll. Great, thank you guys, and I'd like to thank Sebastian, Jack, and Isaac for reading and sharing their stories with us. That is what college essays are about. It's sharing your story with a college. So, without further ado, the winner of this year's contest is Isaac Wills.